This is me remembering to turn on the recording. I didn't do that last time.
Yeah, so Christmas shopping.
Hello. Sorry. Some of you are coming in unmuted. I'm in this, I need to use my mouse, but I need to charge my mouse and I don't know what to do. All right, let me just plug this in. Okay, we'll just go back and forth. All right, you guys can go ahead and keep your cameras off and stay muted if you want to, but it's going to be a real boring chat if I'm the only one talking. You can also put questions in the comments if you don't want to. Good morning. If you don't want to talk out loud, that would be fine. I have stuff to share, but I was going to wait 20-ish minutes and just let people ask questions or bring up stuff that they're working on if anybody has anything.
Well, I do have a photograph. It's a very old one. My cousin found it, and I think it's a daguerreotype. And because it's in that little box and it's red velvet behind it, and we're trying to get a time period so we can try and figure out. She's got to be somebody in the family, or else she wouldn't have it. But it was in her grandfather's belongings somewhere that she got after her father died. She's so my first cousin.
So this is also, so this is in your grandfather's belongings as well, or
No.
This was her other side of the family? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
My father's sister married Herman Holly, and it's a Holly relative that we think that we're looking at.
Okay. Well, I love daguerreotypes. I think that they're so cool. And I have a couple in my family that are not identified, and it's beyond frustrating.
Yes. Okay. But I just kind of, want to get that, because I've got a lot of the lineage for both sides for the Hollies going back to the 1870s.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out who this lady is.
Yeah. So the one that drives me crazy that's from my husband's family, I have it narrowed down. And the way that I did that is I scanned it and I photographed it. I don't know. It depends on how they're made, because there's daguerreotypes and there's ambrotypes, and some of them it's really hard to see the image unless you kind of tilt it, because it's like layered on glass, and some of them it's just a framed image. And this one's the kind that's kind of layered on glass, and I have to tilt it a little bit because it's actually like kind of like a reverse image printed on the glass that you can only see because there's a backing behind it.
Oh, okay.
Just it's different, but I've narrowed it down to a few different people because of the clothing, the time period, and the ages of, it's two women and they're young. And so I got sort of like a Venn diagram of, okay, who was this old and who, maybe had enough money to be getting their portrait taken. Because some people who are in the middle of nowhere probably aren't in fancy dress getting daguerreotypes. But the problem is that I narrowed it down to two families that are very likely candidates. And one of the families had like 7 daughters and I can't tell. So I feel like I might be as close as I'm ever going to be to getting that solved, but I don't know who exactly of the daughters this is likely to be. So, and you only have, if yours is only of one person, you don't even have like a relationship to guess about between the people.
No,
photo.
And I don't have it. Felicia's has it, and I just took a picture of it. When I saw it, I said, this is 18 something or 1890 something.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I discovered that Felicia hadn't known was that Uncle Herman's father, Dr. Holly, had a sister because she died young. And it's a possibility, but she she wasn't so young that she didn't have 11 children.
Yeah.
So she all of a sudden found all these other cousins that she didn't know who were Cofields.
Mhm.
And this is where the part of where the junction of how all of these things happened, that we discovered all of these other people.
Yeah.
And but so she said, I never heard Dr. Holly talk about a sister or anything. I said, that's because she died so young when I finally found it.
Yeah.
And she was just totally shocked. If I share my screen, would you see this picture on that I
I
have
think
here?
so. Yeah. Can you share your screen?
I've never tried to do that.
Let me,
Here, let's see.
I think you
Host
can
is,
share it.
okay. Try again.
Is it gonna let you?
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Did I?
Currently, I think on the bottom, if under security, I think is there a security on the bottom?
Oh, there it is. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. I've never done that before. All right, you should be able to do it now.
Okay. Do you see anything?
Not yet.
What am I not doing? I've never done this before either. So let's see. I got to go back to here. Oh, here it is. I think
There,
that's
it's coming.
there now.
Okay, yeah,
Oh, wow.
that's a really cool image.
I'm trying to get it to widen up a little bit. There we go.
You know, sometimes they're so old and faded and destroyed that they don't look like anything, but that's a great one.
It is. It is. That's why, I was just so, I said, gosh, I wish you had found, someone had told me about this before now, because all of them are gone. I mean, Uncle
Oh, yeah.
Herman, my brother, her mother, all of them. I'm the last one. That's how she keeps introducing me. This was my last living first cousin. Will you stop saying that?
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's, and because I don't have it in my possession, I didn't take it out of the box because I really was afraid to touch it to see if there was anything on the back that might identify it. But like where it was done.
Yeah.
Obviously, well, it was in Eatonton, North Carolina somewhere.
Oh, okay.
I know that much. I mean, that's where the Hollies were.
Yeah. Well, that's still, I mean, that's really good if you've got it narrowed down to a geographic location. The other thing is that, these weren't used all that long because they were kind of pricey and they're really, really fragile. And once they figured out how to make, the flatter prints that you can make lots of copies of, people stopped using these. So this is like 1850, maybe 1860, but it's not like a Kodak snapshot where we're like, okay, well, this
Right.
happened sometime in, the last 60 years. This should be a pretty narrow window of time.
I feel like I had one similar to this, and I feel like I was able to date it pretty closely with like looking at the embossing, or I don't know if that's the right word, but the flowers and the placement of all the ornamentation based on some other things that I found online. But I think I was able to get pretty close to the correct date. I mean, I knew what ancestor it was, but
Yeah.
I think matching up the frame helped me date it at least to something I was comfortable with. I don't know, that might help.
No, that's a good lead. Well, and you said, Marcia, that you didn't look in the back of it, but I bet you there wasn't anything written on the back because people didn't really do that a lot until cabinet cards, because you just didn't even want to take these out of the thing most of the
Yeah,
time.
you can see it's still in the box.
Yeah.
The
'Cause,
blue,
well,
it's blue, the thing, it was a blue case, a little blue case, a little
Well,
cardboard blue box. I'm like, and I opened it and I'm like, oh my goodness.
yeah. Well, and that's why it's in such great condition,
Mhm.
because this is generations of people knowing better than to mess with these. I mean, the worst is when people take these apart and they try to clean them and then they end up erasing the image because it's on the glass.
Oh, okay.
Um, but the other thing you could do, I mean, you said you didn't have this, but there would be there's a huge collector market for these and a lot of people that have a lot of interest. You might be able to find somebody, especially people connected to the historical society that covers the area that this would have been from,
Mhm.
who may be able to give you more information or maybe able to look at the clues like what she's holding, her jewelry, the hairstyle, and really narrow down what they think is a more specific date range.
Mhm.
But it's such a great, and I'm kind of trying to figure out what that thing is like in the
Me too.
background.
It's like, it looks like, that looks like a scout's. And then there's a picture underneath it, I think. It's,
Yeah,
let's see.
but it's like,
It's,
this is such a good photo mystery. It's like all these little hidden clues.
mhm. And that thing in her hand looks like a doily.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I've zoomed in, I think this is actually the glass shade on the lamp. It's not on the wall. Or it could be one of those things, they stick something behind you.
Mm-hmm.
It may not even be
Just like,
um
and don't move. Yeah, normally
real.
it's kind of off to the side though. It's interesting. But if you found other people who had the same thing in the background, then that would also tell you, where it was done.
Mhm.
Do you think what's in her hand is a fan?
I think so.
Oh, okay.
That was my thought too, is it looks like a fan to me.
Yeah.
This thing is not letting me move. It's either all in or all or not.
Oh. But yeah, even the decoration on her sleeves, even the stitching and
Oh,
stuff,
yeah.
it's so cool.
Hmm. Well, okay. At least we can. I now have to go back and look at the ages and see. Oh goodness, 1850 to 1860. That was before Hester married, because Hester married Holly in 1872. Because I have because in the 1870 census, she was her own head of household. And
Mhm.
then I found the marriage license, and she had married him, Jordan Holly, in 1872. And then they were living in the 1881 in, Jordan's household.
Yeah.
And by then she had Oscar and Victoria. And then she had these other four people who were either her brothers and sisters, because Hester is the one that we say was the one who ran away and came across the river with these four children. And
Mhm.
until I found that 1870 census, I couldn't, I was like, Mother, really? And she said, yeah. And then all she knew was Hester.
Mhm.
And out of those four children was born Henry Baker, who was her grandfather, great grandfather.
Yeah.
So this person might even be Hester for all I know. She might not be Holly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. The date range of like when daguerreotypes were really popular, the 1850, 1860, that's always the core when I'm thinking about the date range. But some places were making them for a
Mhm.
while longer. And it's funny because I've got family who was in Wyoming and I couldn't figure out why all of their photos seem to not match the phototype dates. And it's because I think the new technology was so slow getting to Wyoming that it's a solid decade behind everybody else.
Somebody else.
Yeah. Or, they discovered the cabinet card 20 years after New York. But these were, I mean, the newer photography that came after this was just so much more inexpensive and easier to transport that most places, stopped making these
Mhm.
by the, I mean, I don't even know if I've ever seen one that was taken like after 1880. I think at that point they were sort of considered relics,
Okay.
but very cool. I'm glad you shared that.
Okay, I'll flip out now. Take it out.
Well, I can go ahead and just start sharing what I brought. Where am I? Hold on a second. I've lost. Oh, okay. I was going to say I made little things to show you guys and then I couldn't see them, but I can just go ahead and start sharing since we're already talking about identifying photos. Yeah, sure. So I have a ton of unidentified photos of my family. I also have a ton of photos that I've bought from people, and I do put them in my notebook sometimes. So I just wanted to share how I do it. This is not like how you should do it. This is just how I've been doing it. So I use the photos page when I've got collections of photos. You know how, I mean, maybe this doesn't happen in your guys' families, but we have family albums where every now and then you've got a family album that's older, and then there's just like really old or really cool photos sort of stuck in at the edges. Like you open the photo album and a cabinet card falls out and you've got no idea whose cabinet card it is. When I have small little groups of loose photos like that, I generally will put them all together on a photos page and then just mark where I found them so that I'm not assigning them really to anybody. Like I don't just assume that this must be a photo of this child because it was in this family album, because that's not enough to go on. But that way I can sort of keep the photo close until I feel like I have more to go on. Because otherwise I feel like I process so many photos and I'm working on so many different family lines, I'll forget which cabinet card went with which photo or went with which family, or I'll just forget that the cabinet cards exist. And then later when I'm trying to find a photo of somebody, I won't necessarily remember. The other thing I like to do with the photos page is if I've got unidentified photos, but they have something in common, I'll group them. And I actually wanted to share these ones. So all the ones I'm sharing today are not my family photos. They are things that I've bought, to use as props. But this set of photos that I got from, I can't remember, eBay or a flea market, it features some sort of, I think, religious thing that's going on. And I didn't know, I thought maybe if I shared the photo, somebody in the group would know what I'm looking at, just because I'm sort of curious, but it seems like this
I
woman.
would dare think she was probably just becoming a nun because she's the only one in the habit.
Is that, and I wasn't even sure, I wasn't even sure if that was a habit. Isn't that, I'm like, that's how clueless I am about this kind of stuff. But is that what we think this is?
I would dare say so. I don't know. I don't see a cross, but she's got that other thing on top of it. So
Right.
you can't see whether there's anything underneath it.
Well, and it does seem like some sort of uniform, because at first I was like, maybe she's just wearing a really odd dress, but like she specifically is the focus of whatever this event is.
Right.
So I was wondering if she was taking vows.
That would be my thought.
Anyway, but yeah, you know how I feel like with a lot of the unidentified photos that I get from family, I can tell that it's somebody's wedding or some sort of gathering where the same people in the same clothing show up in different snapshots, and I'll put them together because every now and then you'll get a break and you'll be able to identify something about one of the photos, and that'll unlock the rest of them. So these photos pages, I have research log. Well, I've got research books that go with each family line where I have notes, and that's where I keep track of what I've looked up and the documents that I've ordered and stuff like that. I keep these in that book. And I write down like where I took them from, but if I had a chapter about Christopher King, I wouldn't put unidentified photos taken out of his estate in his chapter, because until I identify them, it doesn't actually add anything to his ancestor story. And my actual books tend to be thick enough that I don't need to add in tons of pages of unidentified photos. I will also do this kind of photo is the sort that breaks my heart. This is a great group photo, but it's in terrible condition. And, you know, you blow it up and it doesn't get much better. But I hate to just ignore group photos, because group photos are great, not only because they capture a lot of people, but in settings like this, where obviously this is like adults and children, so it suggests some sort of family connection. You can try to figure out how old everybody is, and sometimes that will be enough to tell you who the people are and when the photo might be from. There we go. But this one, you know, I always tell people look at the photo itself, to see if there's any notes written on the back, look around for a processing date, look for a photographer stamp, look at the background and at landmarks, or even you know, not only just landmarks or shop names or things like that, but I'll look for cars, I'll look for license plates, anything to suggest anything. And all this photo is really blurry faces and wildly nondescript clothing that sort of narrows it down to maybe like a 20-year time period. Anyway, you can see why this photo ended up in my hands after floating around on eBay. But if it was a family photo, I would still be trying to figure stuff out based on their ages. And I have used this for things like this, but not very often. So the photo memory page, I mostly use it for actual memories of what was in the photo. But this isn't it, but I had a photo that came out of a frame after somebody passed away, and it was passed down to me. It's from my husband's family. And they were all excited to give it to me because it must have been important because it was in a frame, and that was all anybody knew about it. So nobody has any idea who's in it or why it was framed. I don't even know. I'm almost worried that, again, this isn't the photo. The photo is pretty enough that I almost worry that they just bought it as a decoration, and now I've got it scanned into a family tree research book, and I'm trying to figure out who it is, and we're not related to them. But if you have something like that, I feel like the practice of framing somebody else's old family photos is relatively new, and even now not that many people do it. So if there's something that was framed in one of your relatives' homes, then it probably is some family photo that they knew enough that either they knew who the person was and they just didn't bother to tell anybody, or they at least knew it was important, even if they didn't write it down. So that's where I would use the photo memory page and just make a note that the actual memory is the photo being hung, not what's in the photo. But that being said, I mean, if I were to be struck by lightning right now and somebody came in, half of my photos are photos that I've bought, they would be really confused about my archive. So I suppose if you happen to be related to a collector, that could really throw you off. And then
They would also wonder why you keep buying them, that they don't even belong to you.
I know, right? It's a very strange hobby. I'm actually going to put out a couple of photo books soon. Oh, I made 2 of these and I didn't send the other one. Because I've just got such a great collection, and I wanted to share them with other people who collect them. So I'm just going to put them up on Amazon in Kindle Unlimited so that people can export this page so that people can look at them. But I also thought it probably wouldn't be the worst thing if I actually put them into books that were clearly labeled people I'm not related to, so that my kids are not confused. Okay. So I made 2 of these that we can work on. And these are the photo study pages. These I use all the time. And I don't only use them for unidentified photos, but they're great for unidentified photos because it organizes your thought process as you're trying to solve the mystery. So if I open GoodNotes, oh no, is it going to be mad? Sorry, I keep forgetting that GoodNotes and Zoom don't play well together.
Oh,
I really, really want you to open. No? All right, never mind. I don't want to make it angry. Okay, we'll have to pretend. And okay, force quit. There we go. All right. I mean, I could try to, I've never used this to actually like mark these up. No, that's not even gonna work, is it? And I guess I could do this. All right. So if we don't know what the subject of this photo is, and we don't really know anything about it, but we do know that it's a cabinet card. Can I not even do text? Sorry, I'm being dense. All right, there we go. Oh, I hate it when it center, you know what I mean? When it's formatted so that it's in the center. I hate that. I feel like I always want it to be to the left, and it knows I always want it to be to the left, and it thinks it's funny to not. Okay. The photographer, I think that says Wesh. Do you guys see that? It's sideways.
Probably west. A lot of times the
West.
T's they didn't cross like that. I don't know.
Yeah, it looks like west.
Okay. I'll take it. So west, and that is in Lincoln, Illinois. And then costume description. This is where getting out the books of historical costume helps. I mean, I would say just really loosely based off of what I know. I mean, cabinet cards were really popular in the 1880s to the 1900s. I would say this is closer to the mid 1880s, but I don't think I know enough about that to just date it based on looking at the photo. But I could come in and I could say, you know, that this dress has this kind of sleeve, it has this kind of belt, if they have any kind of jewelry, if her hair was a more specific hairstyle, that would all go right there. And then unfortunately, this one has absolutely nothing in the background. But like in the photo that we were looking at for Marcia, it had that weird thing in the background, which, you know, and we spent more time looking at it, we might be able to identify. That could be helpful. A lot of times with the cabinet cards, if they were traveling photographers, they have these backgrounds that you could actually buy and, you know, have like a kit so that you could become a cabinet card photographer. So you have to be careful because sometimes different photographers will have the same background because it was mass produced. And so just because this background is being used by this photographer, it doesn't mean that every photo with that background can be attributed to that photographer. But if you look on, let's see, file, new window. If you look on, so if you do a Google photo search, right here, you can search by image. And if I wanted to, let me just pick one. I wonder if I can find one that has a background. These are all of the photos that I've collected to use as props. It's from Europe. I'm trying to see if I can find one that has like something going on in the background, you know, a studio portrait. Nothing's really grabbing me. I'll just do this one. Okay, so I can upload this file. And Google's now going to try to find photos that have similar elements to them.
Wow.
So this is helpful because you can see it didn't find the exact background, which I was sort of hoping for. Although I have to admit, this looks like it was in somebody's home, so I guess that would have been weird. But you can tell that it's found very similar costume. And sometimes you can find photos that look enough like your photo that it'll give you a closer date range. So not perfect, but don't forget to use Google image search. And when you use Google image search and you upload photos like that, Google doesn't save them. So you don't have to worry about privacy or anything like that. There's nobody can access my search just because I used this image to search Google. Anyway, I don't know. So without looking at her fashion and what he's wearing, the type of tie and all that, I don't think that I can get much closer. But if you, again, were to make a little Venn diagram in your head and say, okay, so who was alive during the time that cabinet cards were popular? Who would have been in the area of Lincoln, Illinois, either living there or close enough to be passing through, a visiting family? That may narrow it down. The other thing you have to remember with cabinet cards, kind of like school portraits, if we go through our ancestors things now, we may find a lot of school portraits that were mailed out and that are actually distant cousins, children, or the children of friends and family. They aren't necessarily that person's child. Cabinet cards weren't shared to that extent, but it was the first time that people were able to make multiple copies of the same photo and share it relatively cheaply. So you might have somebody who has cabinet cards of people who are distant relatives, or maybe they're people that they're friends of the family, but they're not actual family members. You're more likely to have cabinet cards like that than you are things like daguerreotypes or tintypes, or things that were more expensive to create and were, one-shot photos. And then I did one for a more recent one, and I won't bother typing on this one. Snapshots are sometimes frustrating because they were so easy to create and print that you're going to end up with many more snapshots that are unidentified generally. And people also, tossed them into those paper albums, and then the glue disintegrated and all of the photos fell out. And 2 generations down, nobody has any idea who the people in the photos were. But again, even photos that seem like they're not able to be identified because there's nothing written on them, and this isn't really a very specific spot. It's not like they're in front of the Eiffel Tower. We're not totally sure where these people are. But you can look, and there's a car in the background that you can work on to see, okay, what type of car, make and model. I don't know enough about cars. I would get interested in cars for about 10 minutes if I really wanted to date this photo. But cars are actually really handy. Hairstyles here. The man's hairstyle suggests 60s, 70s.
70s.
So, and again, there may be people who are out of fashion that you can extend that a little bit, but yeah, this is screaming late 60s, early 70s to me. And then he does have a jacket on. He has some sort of, not a uniform, but something suggesting a uniform. And if I was to really zoom in, I could take a closer crop of this badge or whatever this is right here, and include that, down here in the notes, because this is going to say a lot about whatever it is that he's wearing. I don't know off the top of my head what that is. I don't know what they're holding. I don't know what's going on in this photo, but theoretically, again, if I was really motivated and this was somebody from my family, those would all be things that I could use. And in the meantime, I could just keep this page with my research for that family line. And it's possible that this is, again, just some snapshot of some friend of the family, and it's not really that relevant to my family tree. But when we're doing our research, even people in the fan network, you know, we want to get as much information about them as possible, especially if we have brick walls in that line. I will say I don't keep all of the unidentified family photos, especially the more recent ones, because there's a certain point where you just can't store everything. But
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that when you're saying about not keeping them all. You have a ton of photos and and I've collected them, scanned them from anywhere I could get a hold of. There's a lot of them there. Do you, like, when do you draw the line to say as keeping and scanning and labeling and, or do you just, as you say, how do you know when to let go?
yeah, I mean, I think it's hard and it depends a lot on lots of circumstances. There's the issue of how much space do you have? How, and it's not, I always tell people there's physical space and there's emotional space. If having all of those photos just sitting around in boxes is stressful on any level, then it's not worth keeping them all. I'm actually kind of spoiled in that I have scanned a ton of photos and I have them on my hard drives and on Google and in the cloud, but I don't have most of the physical photos that I've scanned because they're still in the possession of other people. And so that's cheating because I've basically offloaded and made it, you know, continue to be somebody else's problem. But like when my grandmother passed away, I did inherit all of the photos that came out of that estate. And it was my grandfather had died before her. So it was all of their photos and they had quite a few. And it was difficult, but once everything was scanned, and I scanned everything, I scanned even the random, you know, zoo photos where they take like 9 photos of the elephant and you're just like, why did they think anybody would ever care about this? I scanned them. And then the elephant photos and the other photos that were really just fringe, they did go in the garbage because I don't know, there's just a point where you can't create a physical museum to every ancestor that passes away. And if you've scanned them and you're trying to, you know, be the steward of the stories and the memories, you can do that without physically having all of the photos. So I tend to keep the photos that are really irreplaceable. And other than that, I kept a lot of the group photos. Also, once they were scanned, and then I just put them into, you know, photo storage boxes really tight, and then I just put them away in my storage, and I'm not like dealing with them all the time.
Right.
So they're sort of out of sight, out of mind.
As I say, I'm pretty much the last one that knows these photos of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even earlier. And I'm the last one. So I know that if I don't do something with them, no one has a clue who's who. Like there is nothing. So I guess I'll go through and try and find the ones that I'm pretty darn sure I'm not even 100% sure of and move them out because I can't. Yeah, like I got to do something with them, and giving them a bunch of photos like I had was given to me is not going to help them any. They're probably going to pitch them anyway. So
yeah, I mean, if you have the energy, I would still scan them first, just so that there is a record of them that can stay in your family, as long as you also make sure that there's a way for people to access the scans. But yeah, from what I've seen, I think people hang on to photographs for maybe 2, at the most 3 generations, and then somehow along the way, people just
make
lose
that
track.
decision to say it's time to let it go, and the people down the road don't ever get to see them. Yeah.
Right.
Or you have ancestors who hoard them and won't let you see them.
Yeah.
I have one like that, and it hurts.
No, I bet there's one of my husband's aunts she keeps telling me that I'm going to get all of this stuff when she dies. I'll see all the photos when she dies. And I just want to be like, they will be worth so much less to me if you pass and then hand me a box of crap. But
I have the same. I have a relative, and I mean, somehow he wants to control it. So he wants us to do it together, but he never has the time. So I'm saying I could at least get it and scan it, and then we could do it together. But no, doesn't want to hand it over, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's the
I know the
same thing.
feeling.
I don't know. It's a control thing, I think.
Waiting for the perfect day that's not going to come.
Mhm.
Well, and I mean, it's also like, especially if you're the person that's been protecting the photos, I think it's emotionally loaded to hand them over. But at the same time, it's gonna be like, you're not taking them with you, and nobody else knows what these are. So yeah, it's a panicky feeling to feel like the photos are just going to slip into the ether and not be useful to the family.
Well,
But
it also doesn't help when most of the people don't really care either. Like they think, oh, it's cool, but they don't really care. And so now what do you do? Where does it go from there, right?
yeah,
Oh, well,
and you might get people who will care later, because I think the younger people are and the busier they are, the harder it can be to talk them into genealogy.
yeah.
But
What I
But the
started,
thing that crosses my mind is these people that I know as my uncles, no one else remembers them except at this point in time, me. So I feel very strongly about the fact that I'm keeping them quote unquote alive. Because once I let them go, there is no, like, they just don't exist. They're, as you say, they disappear into ether and they don't exist anymore. So I kind of, that's where I'm torn. Like, how detailed does one go at the same time without tying their lives up doing it? This can, like you said, full-time job trying to do this, right?
yeah,
So it's a fine line. I'm sure everybody has the same problem, right? In that general area.
mm-hmm.
what I started doing was I got my husband to take our trailer, and I took my printer and my scanner, and every time we would go to a different town when we were traveling, I would put on Facebook to the family that this is my vehicle, I'm here, and people would come and meet me at Walmart to knock on the door and say, I'm your family, here's a box of pictures. They would scan them.
Wow.
I would ask them what they were. We would write it out. Then I would print them a copy. So the deal was I would give them a digital copy and a printed copy if they bring them for me to scan. So I do that, and they tell me who everybody was. We have a visit, and then they go, and then another one would knock on the door and say, "Hi, I'm your cousin such and such."
Mm-hmm.
And then one time when I was going through in the States, I was going through like Columbus Falls, and one of my cousins said, no, you left too soon. I was trying to catch up with you.
Oh.
I'm not. So now it's become a thing where people ask me when I'm traveling so that they can come and meet me and bring their stuff to me. So I found that happens a lot. Like I keep my scanners in my car and my printer, and wherever I go, I pull it out and I'll do it right there, because people always say they don't have time, but if you're visiting and you're standing there, I'll say, oh, do you have some pictures I can do? Last year I did over 800 pictures at a cousin in Sault Ste. Marie. I went over there and I said to her, do you have any pictures? And I have a few. And she started bringing out album after album as I was scanning and scanning. And I was there for like 8 hours. My husband had to go to the cemetery without me and search for my relatives. And then he sent me pictures and said, I found one. And then I kept scanning and scanning and scanning. So it seems to be that I appreciate that people, when they have something, they want to hold it and keep it and not necessarily give it away. But I also, if I've gone and scanned it and then I leave them a card, I tell them, when you're ready to, to pass these on, here's my information.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm getting boxes and boxes of stuff sent to me. And one of my relatives in Columbus Falls was a priest, and he said, oh, I have all the letters between my parents during the war. Do you want those?
Oh.
I'm like, yeah. So he mailed me a huge box of stuff that like 3 weeks later, I got a huge box of all these letters. And one of them was a letter that my grandmother sent to his grandmother, who was my grandfather's sister. And when her mother died, he gave all the information, or my grandmother sent her the information saying about, how her mother had died, and all this information, pages and pages, and how the little kids used to brush her hair and everything. So I got all this from a letter that he sent. So sometimes it's just a matter of actually getting physically out there and at their place and saying, it doesn't have to go anywhere but here. I'll sit right here and do it and chat. I even got to hold my great-great-grandfather's derringer that he pulled out of a paper bag.
Yeah, I had a similar situation and I had a cousin, we were able to go to the house, but he would not bring the boxes down. And he wouldn't even let me in the kitchen because there was ancient pictures on the wall there that I couldn't see. And I thought, like, I mean, it's very frustrating. He's only a single person. He's not married. There's no kids. I don't know what's going to happen to the photos when he goes, because like, talk about, you say hoarding or control. I mean, he really has this issue with controlling those photos.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of doing like a little traveling bookmobile for genealogy. That's gonna be my next business, you guys.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get a fleet of RVs and I'm gonna just load them up and then you guys can rent them and go around the US.
Well,
Okay.
I'm a photographer and videographer as well. So I actually, when they came, I said, okay, now I have to do your picture to have you in the tree. So
Oh,
I did that. I made everybody do group shots. So it was quite fun to do that. And the more that I visit them, the more now that they bring out and want to share. And I even got like one of my relatives' watches and stuff like that. But it takes a long time to build that rapport. And you know, I had one relative one time call me a commercial huckster because I charged $20 for a book I printed for a reunion. And I was like, I said, I'm not making anything from this. I'm just getting the printing cost from it. And anyway, he was 98 and he came to a reunion and he said to me, oh, who did this book? Can I buy this? And I'm like, that's the book you said I was commercial huckster.
yeah.
He says, oh, you've done so much research. I said, I understand. It's because when you have a passion for something and you think that you put your whole life into it, and then somebody just walks up and starts using your information, you feel like all that you've done is going to be gone, and people forget that you did all the work. But I showed him right how his name was in there, etc. And then when he saw that I wasn't just a fly by night, that I actually did a lot of work, then suddenly he was like, oh, okay, you're okay now because you actually did the work behind the story. So it sometimes takes years and years to actually get them to realize that that's what you're doing and that you do have a passion for it as well. But right now, like I even have people, I drive by, people are handing me wedding dresses and all sorts of things. So it's a wonderful thing that, of course, as you all know, we all become extremely addicted, and then, you know, we're stuck with all of this stuff as well, which I like. But my family said, well, who's going to get it after you? And I said, well, I've got them in boxes saying this is going to this museum and this is going to this museum and this is going there, because you're right, like none of the future generations really care, but they do like that we've scanned it in and we have it all made up for them.
Yeah.
So they don't really want to lose it and they want it to be somewhere, but they don't want to have it. So you can do that. I've even gone through now, I had a 97-year-old cousin who she called me up and says, you need to come right away because I might die today. I have something for you. So I'm, oh, okay. So wait, no, it has to come today. So I drove like 3 hours to go see her. And my daughter said, Mom, she's like walking, there's nothing wrong with her. She just lost her license last year. I said, she's in great shape. She goes, most of our relatives are a lot worse off than she is. And so then she met her, and then 2 weeks later, so she gave us all this information. And then 2 weeks later, she called and said, you need to bring that really nice young girl down because I have something for her. And she gave her what I always wanted, which was my great-great-great-grandmother's hand-hooked rug from Ireland when they came over.
Oh.
And so she gave it to her and said, I'm giving this to you. And I got my great-great-grandmother's clock. So I was like, and she says, oh, you know, what? And so anyway, my other son said that my daughter's going to have to look after everything. So now she has to go with me so she knows what's going on.
Yeah. Well, that was worth a 3-hour road trip though.
It sure was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 road trips. But I don't know. I know that there's like lots of families where there really isn't anybody, but I always remind people that my husband's family, my husband's large, sweet family. They are Ohio and West Virginia Baptists for the last 200 years. Nobody had organized their genealogy. They did not see me coming, like the half Chinese girl from Utah who just showed up, and I was like, give me all your photos, I'm going to put this together. But I'm the one that processed everything, and then I'm giving them their books back, and that's been unlocking lots of things for them. And so many of them said, well, I just never thought, nobody was interested. But I just feel like sometimes you just don't know, like you got to keep it safe and keep writing things down, because it makes me sad when I think about the people that have passed away that I didn't get to meet. And like you said, once it's processed and, pre-chewed, and I've put it into a family tree notebook, everybody's interested. It's just that when it's in a cardboard box or an album where it's stuck on somebody's wall, nobody actually wants to do the legwork. But yeah, I'm like, I don't know, you might have a future biracial random relative coming at you from the other side of the country. You don't know, so keep your photos safe, but can't predict it. The hard thing will be if we don't print out the photos that we take now, all the digital photos. Talk about going into the ether. They're just not going to be findable for any of the future generations. There's going to be this weird gap where there's no photos of people from the 1980s or the next, well, no, that's too early, from the 2000s.
What I did was I every time I take pictures, I print them all out, not even on photo paper, just on regular paper, and laminate them. And then I tape them on every wall in my house. And now all of my grandchildren come and they look on the wall and they go, there's me, so now they go, and I did that specifically so that they could touch them. They pull them down, it doesn't matter, they can look at them, but I put them all at their level, like knee level, all the way from floor to ceiling on all the walls, just on laminate. And that's the only way, I think, is that if we get the future generations to look at it and say, there's me, there's this what's going on, then they get interested, and then they'll say, look, up this line, look, I can see all my people, look at, that's my great grandmother.
Yeah.
I think it's only if we make that effort to actually display it in whatever method from the time they're small. And like I made them a little, those the plastics you can wipe them off book for babies. So from the time they're little, they can say, that's my grandma, that's my great grandma, that's my great grandma, because our kids don't even necessarily know the way people are connected. So if you have a little like book like that, and I have different ones for the different size that they can look through, touch, wrinkle, whatever. I think we have to do that kind of thing in order to get them to look at it. It's all fine and good to do something for ourselves, but ultimately we're going to be gone, and then who's going to care? So if we don't get the little kids excited and interested, then where are we, right?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Go
I'm
ahead,
thinking the same that you said, it disappears. I just got a nephew 3 months ago, and there are all these WhatsApps going back and forth and little movies, and I mean, how do you preserve this stuff? You have to think about it and make sure that you can somehow keep it for him so that he knows that we cared a lot.
Right. Celebrated his babyhood. No, I mean, that's a really good point, especially with like the holidays coming up. If you've got little ones that are still little, it's very possible that they don't have photo books of themselves to look at, because like my kids, their photos, I enjoy them, but they're all on my phone, or they're on my husband's phone, or, they don't have access to their baby photos. And so for the last couple of years, my kids get a photo book of their year every Christmas, and then they love it because I forget that they're not actually seeing their photos. I'm taking them and sharing them on Instagram, and strangers are seeing them, but they're not seeing photos of their Halloween costume. So, but it took me, I think my daughter was like 8 before I gave her first photo book, because I just didn't think about it until she was that old.
And also what you said, Catherine, to do it so that they can hold it, and they don't have to be careful, and they can really feel it.
Yeah, I created a little quilt for each of them, like a quilt square. So on that quilt square's got their like kind of the main things that happened that year. And then the point is being that when they're 16, they'll have 16 quilt squares, right, that they can put together to make a big quilt for when they go away to school. And it'll have like all their things that have happened that have been important to them, you know, with little ribbons. And so if they won an award or anything like that, a little picture of them. So it's on there. So when they sit down, they can look at their quilts and they know, and if they go away to school, to college or university or whatever, they have that to take with them as their family momentum. And you know, they know that you worked at making that, and it's something that's important to them. So that was something I thought. And I also created for each of them for when they went off to school. I did family prayers, and I did, I got my mother to bake with them, and I did a little video of that. And I did like a video of doing like a family activity and the rosary, and I put all that onto a CD. And when they went away to college, I gave them that CD to take with them. And so then when they were lonely, they could put that in and they could say their prayers with their family, or they could, you know, be part of a birthday party or anything like that, because it was something they could look at. Now I'd probably put on a flash drive, but then I put it on.
Yeah. Well, we have only a couple minutes left in the hour. Did anybody have any questions? They don't have to be related to photos. Any questions about your notebooks or things you're working on? We're going to talk about the new enslavement photos tomorrow night, if you're going to be able to join, or not enslavement photos, enslavement pages tomorrow night, and using those and finding and dealing with those records. Do we have a question from the back? All right, well, I'm glad you guys showed up to chat with me. These are so fun. It's really like nice to see you guys. Oh, well, and I don't, Maria, what time is it where you are? I know I always ask you, but
now it's almost 6 p.m. So I came straight from the office.
okay. I want you to know that I do think about you when I'm scheduling things, and I'm like, is this a good time for Maria? I have no idea. So I haven't locked
those
in.
of you who don't know, I'm in Sweden.
Yeah.
So.
I tend to. There was one Zoom we did, and what time? It was like 2 in the morning or something.
Yeah, it was. I think it was 4 in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was sitting here, sort of all wrapped up in my.
Right, and then just halfway through our Zoom chat, she just mentioned that she'd set an alarm and got up at 4 a.m. and I was like, okay, I need to not schedule things at this time. Whatever time this is, it's bad for Maria.
Yeah, but it was a good chat.
Anyway, all right, well, I will close this one down. Thank you guys for being here, and hopefully I'll see some of you tomorrow night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
All right, see you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.